100, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow, I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow, got pain like an arrow, got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops, got tears like the raindrops, got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops, got tears like the raindrops, got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I got strength like a mountain, got strength like a mountain, I got strength like a mountain in my soul. I got strength like a mountain, got strength like a mountain, I got strength like a mountain in my soul. And I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul.
Good morning. Welcome to the online service of the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. We begin with our land acknowledgement. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. The land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. As settlers, we continue to benefit from the land and its resources. As settlers, we must ask ourselves how or if we have shared and cared for the earth and its gifts. Facing the truth is hard, but truth must come before reconciliation. My name is Tim Versteeg, and it is my privilege to serve as this church's religious educator, and this morning I will be your service leader. Our speakers this morning are Sheila Dundooley, Catherine Schuler, and Reverend Jamie Boyce. A special thank you goes out this morning to Gregory Wallace, who created a video especially for this service. Our musicians this morning are Rachel Derry and Cindy Carey, and technical support for this morning's service is provided by Brian Carey, Marianne Forbes, Josh McIntyre, John Elliott, and Bruce McPherson. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey of faith or search for meaning, today you are one of us, and you are welcome in this house of worship. Our mission is to nurture one another, serve the community, and inspire action to heal the world. Our chalice lighting words this morning come from Through the Rose Window, Art, Myth, and the Religious Imagination by John F. Hayward. Art can have an important place in every human life and is more than the province of a gifted few. No house should be built with any seriousness without some degree of art, No important letter should be written without an inescapable thrust toward artistry. No family or church celebrates good fortune or gathers itself against the onslaught of trouble without some degree of artistic arrangement of the activities of its members. For in all these things, art is the creation of new forms or the release of old forms, whereby fallible people reach a new level of individual meaningfulness and mutual support. In its barest essentials, art is no more than the effort to make human life more livable and lovable. I invite you to join us in our chalice lighting words. May this flame be our light of friendship and love.
$10.18, come and go with me. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
Last Tuesday was International Women's Day, and this morning, as we celebrate creativity in our lives, our story for all ages is about Agnes Martin, a well-known abstract artist born in Saskatchewan in 1912. Agnes Martin lived in diverse places such as Vancouver, New York, and finally Taos, New Mexico, where she passed away in 2004. But before we read the story, I'd like to show you a few of her paintings. Martin said, "All artwork is about beauty. All positive work represents it and celebrates it. All negative art protests the lack of beauty in our lives. When a beautiful rose dies, beauty does not die because it is not really in the rose. Beauty is an awareness in the mind." I hope you enjoy this morning's story about the childhood of Agnes Martin, and following the story, we will view creativity of another kind made by Gregory Wallace from our children's program. Our story this morning is called "Where Are You, Agnes?" by Tessa McWatt, illustrated by Susanna Silage. When Agnes was quite young and her grandfather was quite old, she fell upon a mystery. "What do you think?" her grandfather asked. "It's beautiful," Agnes said. Then her grandfather did the strangest thing. "Is it still beautiful?" he asked. Agnes thought for so long that it seemed she had forgotten the question. "Yes," she cried. Agnes felt something tingling inside. "Can everyone see that?" she asked. Her grandfather thought for a long time, until it seemed he had forgotten the question. "I don't exactly know," he said. Agnes looked from the straight horizon to her grandfather's crooked eyebrows and back again. And the next day she picked up her favorite pencil and began to draw. Each day she watched the sky that went on and on and on in the distance and drew the lines she saw. Every morning, she watched the birds come and go, and she drew the feeling of the sun and the movement of wings. She drew the shapes she saw in the wheat, in the tractor tires, and the diamond-shaped lines on the backs of snakes. She tried to follow the lines to see where they would lead her. "Where are you, Agnes?" her mother would call to the fields. But Agnes was following the crisscross lines in her mind, and she didn't hear. When her mother asked where she disappeared to when she was drawing, Agnes would say, "I don't exactly know." One day, her grandfather decided to move the family from their big house on the prairie to a tiny house in a busy city. Agnes worried that the birds would never find her. She searched for snakes, for rows of wheat, and for the straight horizon, but they had disappeared. Her brothers and sister liked to ride the carousels and ring the bells at the summer fair, but Agnes liked to sit beside a tree staring at insects and the patterns they made in the dirt. "Bugs are creepy," her brothers would say. "Worms are scary," her sister would say. But Agnes drew the tiny creatures using her pencil, and as she drew, the feeling of the rainbow would come again and again and again. "That doesn't look like a caterpillar," her brother told her one day. "That's creepy," her sister said. And off they went to ring bells and ride carousels. "Where are you, Agnes?" her mother would call at the end of the day. But Agnes was enjoying her drawing so much that she didn't hear. At her new school, Agnes wrote curved letters on the blackboard in chalk. She loved the feeling of making her name. But the next morning at school, she felt sad. "Why do things have to disappear?" Agnes asked her grandfather when she got home. Her grandfather thought for a long time until it seemed he had forgotten the question. "Let me think about that one," he said finally. Her grandfather looked a little pale, so she didn't want to bother him anymore. It had been a long time since Agnes had felt the rainbow. She wanted the feeling again, so she went to the park with all her colors. "That's ugly," her brother said. So Agnes painted the tree again. "That's a bit ugly," her sister said, and she painted again and again. "Where are you, Agnes?" her mother would call, even when they were in the same room. Agnes showed her paintings to her grandfather, and his eyebrows told her that she was getting closer. "But how do I paint a real tree?" she asked him as she held on to him tightly, because he seemed so wobbly. She watched his eyebrows as he thought for so long that it seemed he had forgotten the question. "The tree won't be there forever," he said finally. "It could be chopped down, it could get rotten and die. But you will remember the tree and see it in other places." "But how?" she asked. "Look here," he said, pointing. "And there, and there. Something real is felt here," he said, putting his hand on his heart, "so the thing you love can appear everywhere." In school, Agnes learned about fractions in the solar system. She liked to make equations and think about the moon. Then one day, when she came home, everything was different. Agnes became so sad that she stayed in bed. She would not go to school. She would not eat dinner. She would not talk to anyone. She could not find joy. But many days later, she heard a voice in her mind. She hurried to the park. She saw it in a different way. She got that feeling of the rainbow, here and there and everywhere. She ran home and painted this and that and everything until she painted what was on the inside walls of her mind. It was the feeling of beauty, and beauty became the mystery she traced her whole life. That's the end of our story. Now we can enjoy the video.
Good morning. My first reaction to doing this talk was, where is Reverend Jamie leading me in asking me to speak about art as a spiritual practice? Since childhood, art has been many things for me: frustrating, energizing, uplifting, and challenging. But a spiritual practice? Don't think so. No, not that. Well, this week has been like a spiritual retreat for me. And now I can humbly share some insights with you. Please know that I feel vulnerable sharing these with you. Here goes. First, my spirituality rests with nature, with our world, its natural processes, the botanical, geological, biological, etc. I find its beauty and interconnectivity profoundly simple on one level, yet complex and mystifying on others. Forces like evolution and natural selection raise me up in awe. I am at peace in nature. And most of my art is of nature. I now think my art is a conduit to my higher power. No wonder that during the pandemic, I've been driven to create vignettes on my Canada's Nature quilt. Last Sunday, it dawned on me that I attribute much of my spirituality and art to a long ago treasured experience. The Heshquit First Nation near Clayoquot Sound, BC, hired archaeologists, including me, to teach and dig with their youth. At a midsummer late night party, we were shocked to learn that the Heshquit, long oppressed by settlers, mistrusted us deeply. So you can imagine how affirming it was when Alice, elder and master weaver, agreed, on one condition, to teach two of us about her basketry. The conditions? We were not to publish or sell what she offered us. One morning, Alice invited us to her holy ground. Her low chanting sought the forest's approval in her search for an ancient cedar from which she could harvest a 40-foot-long piece of bark. She invoked the support of the squirrel, the forest's champion. We hiked until the ocean waves were silent. Alice shushed us. Then she began chanting to the 500-year-old tree, asking for its forgiveness and giving it thanks, and promises of sustainable harvesting, just as her ancestors had done for millennia. Days later, we began basket weaving. Alice chanted to the penultimate weaver, the spider, while symbolically washing her hands in its webs. Her reverence eased the distance between material and person. They were one. She said to us, "People who do not chant do not make good baskets." Nonetheless, my beginner's basket is a constant touchstone in my life, ever present on a shelf or table. I strive towards Alice's trusting, her patience, and her deeply grounded spirituality. Strive is the operative word. And I can say now, like Alice, my work shows me what a tiny role I have in an interconnected web. I now realize I commune with my materials. I actually have an inner dialogue that seeks out their acceptance and inspiration, sometimes. And I can express gratitude and joy when things are going well. Completed works rise me up to a higher level. Sometimes I ring a small bell hanging in my studio. The sound awakes me and permeates me. It often slows my racing ADHD mind. Indeed, art pulls me in so close that I actually experience focus that I later try to conjure up elsewhere in my life. But believe me, it is not all rosy. Sometimes the despair and depression, deaths, world affairs, or anxiety can pull me and my art down. But miraculously, the spirit re-enters, and I work with those raw feelings, and art rises me up again. Thich Nhat Hanh's meditations have tiptoed into my practice. I find myself contemplating growth patterns of barnacles, or native plants that I stitch and restitch, rice patterns in sushis, or a cow's face. On a concrete level, our social justice work emerges in works like A Housing Crisis, which is a pile of smashed hermit crab shells, The seventh principle appears in Suburban Sprawl, a porcelain tidal pool polluted by one tiny bread tag, or in my prints, like Wings Set Me Free. UUs uphold the inherent dignity and worth of all. Some of my art, rough, raw, and tumbling work, has released me from things that were holding me back, and I can now say that the inherent dignity and worth of all applies to me too. Art has helped me define myself. We know there is connection in art. Drawn lines link me back to the first Homo sapiens who drew on a cave wall 60,000 years ago. Paper takes me to ancient paper makers, colors to pigment hunters, and more recently, digital art, far more adept on computers than me. But especially, art connects me with children and my grandchildren. This week has taught me that making art is a spiritual practice for me, and it's deeply personal, and that it is a way to vault me into the mysteries of life that make meaning for me. It is a spiritual practice. Thank you to my beloved Kate for being my production manager, and to beloved Reverend Jamie for helping me bring into awareness so much about my spirituality and art. And a very special thank you to each of you for hearing my musings.
Now is the time in our service when we settle into a place of meditation, reflection, and prayer. I invite you to relax into your seat. Notice yourself held in love and care in this moment. Perhaps touch upon your breath, feel it moving through your body, and offer gentleness to yourself. Maybe place your hand on your heart and feel the rise and fall of your breath, and offer more kindness in this moment. The last years, weeks, and days have held great challenges for our world and for each of us individually. None of us has escaped heartbreak or weariness, and many of us have faced the most devastating of losses. Fear is moving through us these days. We witness the abuse of power and the violence of war in our world. And as our hearts are opened in compassion for the people of Ukraine, may we remember that we cannot look away, hide from, or avoid the terror of oppression at home or throughout the world. May the tenderness of these days invite us to keep bearing witness to injustice here and everywhere. As we notice our breath, may the seeds of compassion bloom and blossom in our lives. As we reflect in quiet today, may we reawaken a creative playfulness, a world of imagination, of possibility alive in each of us. May we recall that the spark of creativity is present in each of us as a source of individual and collective power that manifests in healing, beauty, kindness, love, and justice in the world.
This power invites us to see the world in new ways, to change our minds, to understand the mystery of life and the power of love. May a spark of creativity light in each of us, no matter our age, and remind us of a joy that is here in the midst of our troubles, and that we are here to love one another. We are here to love the earth, and we are here to love justice. As we enter a time of collective silence, let these words of Emily Dickinson lead us into the quiet. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. I invite us into a time of transformative silence. May there be peace in our hearts and peace in the world.
There is a space that exists with us and around us. Where angels sing on rays of light. On rays of light. And love pours forth. Love pours forth. Love pours forth from the heart of the universe. There is a space that exists with us and around us. Where angels sing on rays of light. On rays of light. And love pours forth. Love pours forth. Love pours forth from the heart of the universe. There is a space that exists with us and around us. Where angels sing on rays of light. On rays of light. And love pours forth. Love pours forth. Love pours forth from the heart of the universe.
creating or just making things has been part of my life since I was very young. I'm happier saying I make things rather than saying I'm an artist, although I think some of the things I make probably qualify as art. My mother was a talented seamstress and competent at every craft she ever tried. How she learned these skills, I really don't know. Her mother's highest praise for a beautifully handmade garment was, well, it doesn't look homemade. Grandma came from a generation that was thrilled when store-bought clothes became available and the drudgery of making everything yourself was over. She put all her creativity into an excellent cooking and her bathtub gin, or so I'm told. Luckily, my mother was happy to pass on her skills. She had us all playing with needle and thread and scissors, very young, and even using the sewing machine. These are skills I still use most days. I'm a fidgeter, so I always need to do something with my hands. I find that working with my hands takes me out of any worries or demands of the day and allows me to play, focused on the object I'm dealing with, not thinking of any worries or distractions, completely absorbed. For years, I made all my own clothes, and now I make quilts for my many nieces, nephews, and their kids. And I do embroidery and things that can best be described as textile art, just because I love putting colors and patterns and textures together and seeing what turns out. Sometimes I do use designs by other people, which helps me to learn new skills or ways of designing, but I much prefer to create something of my own. Of course, that sort of experimentation also leads to failure from time to time, or at the very least to major changes in plan. I do a lot of unsewing. My seam ripper is my friend. Unsewing gives me a chance to meditate on my character flaws, impatience and procrastination being key flaws of mine. I still tend to leap into new projects rather than to finish the old ones. Recently, though, I've been practicing something called slow stitching, a type of sewing that is more meditative in practice. Not necessarily aimed at producing something useful, but in finding the beauty in simple materials and stitches and in the process itself. A simple stitch can absorb you for hours when you think about how to do it perfectly or how interesting it can be when you do it imperfectly. My stash tends to take over every room in our house. My stash is my collection of fabrics, threads, beads, buttons, watch parts, really almost anything. And I've found some of those. I've inherited some I've bought in thrift shops, some I have bought. All of those things inspire me and help to turn my work into a bit of heritage. Each piece of fabric, each button or lace reminds me of the person who first made it, or admired it and collected it, or who might have had a plan for how to use it. I'm just starting now to embroider a quilt top that was made by my grandmother and her sisters in the first years of the 20th century. The colors are dull, and the McCoy sisters were dreadful seamstresses, all of them. Mary, Annie, Grandma Kate, and poor Aunt Nellie, sorry Nellie. But I love them all dearly, and this quilt will be a thing of beauty when I'm done linking our generations. Now, just last week, my dear friend Muriel died early on a Wednesday morning, just a few hours before we had planned to Zoom together so that I could show her the quilt that I had made from the bright fabric she'd given me. Muriel knew that she would not have enough strength or enough time to use all her fabrics herself. I'm sorry she never saw what I'd done, but now I have something to remind me of her bright spirit, her gentle way of correcting my French grammar, her generosity, and her humor. Each fabric and each stitch brings me a connection, both a happy time to think of these women who went before me, and a time to hope that perhaps the next generations of my family will one day touch the work of my hands and remember me. I value my time to step out of the everyday as I consider how my need to find beauty and to make beauty helps me to express myself, to connect, and even to step beyond and just stitch. Thank you.
Many thanks to both Sheila and Catherine for sharing their stories with us this morning and their creative journeys. And now it's your turn to share something you've created. In a few moments, you'll be invited to join a breakout Zoom group and share with other congregants something that you have made. You might consider sharing when and why you created your piece of art and what it means to you or what memories it brings. Groups will have about 10 minutes to share with each other, and Bruce will give you a 1-minute warning when he hits 9 minutes. I suggest you assign a timekeeper and allot about 1.5 minutes to each person, and if there's extra time, you can always ask questions at the end. If you don't wish to join a group, you can stay in the main Zoom room and enjoy a small break before we welcome everybody back at the end of the sharing time. And for those of you who are joining us on YouTube live stream this morning, video of the service will resume in about 10 minutes. So you can go get a coffee too.
Number 1020, Wo Ya Ya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
As we take leave today of this celebration of creativity, we offer you this benediction in 3 voices. May our celebration of creativity invite us to know our power to create and imagine. We leave inspired by each other's gifts and talents.
May our celebration of creativity be a mirror of the beauty alive in ourselves, each other, and the world. We leave inspired by what is possible in the community.
May our celebration of creativity across the generations awaken us to the power of loving, caring, justice-centered relationships. We leave inspired by what is possible in the world.
May our celebration of creativity signal the hope leading us into the future as we co-create and celebrate life. We leave today inspired by the promise of that hope and a world crafted by love. Go in peace.